Hey everyone, welcome to the 700 Club. I'm Andrew Knox in for Gordon Robertson. The nation's two largest reservoirs of the Colorado River have reached record low levels, and 40 million Americans in 7 states are feeling the impact.
Increased snow in the Rockies and a plan by 3 states to conserve water is helping to avoid a catastrophe. And yet that's a short-term fix, and a permanent solution is still needed. Caitlin Burke reports.
Major winter storms here in the Northwest left the Rocky Mountains with one of the largest snowpacks on record. As that snow melts, it's expected to help the depleted reservoirs of the Colorado River, which provides water for 7 states.
Nature gave us a lifeline, and we can't waste that lifeline, right?
The Colorado River feeds Lakes Powell and Meade, the nation's largest reservoirs. Serving 40 million Americans, it would be a catastrophe if the water stopped flowing. Last year, as the reservoirs began to reach dangerously low levels, the federal government stepped in, ordering those states to significantly reduce water use.
Using the water rights did not work for Arizona, and the new alternative to cut across the board did not work for California and its water rights. So neither one worked. And what we said, all of us said, we need to come up with a solution that utilizes what's on the table.
Adel Haj-Khalil, general manager of the Metropolitan Water District of Southern California, says an agreement only happened when the Biden administration threatened a plan of its own that state leaders didn't feel served their best interests.
We've deferred the crisis for 3 years, maybe a little bit longer, but it's still a very urgent problem. As
a part of the New Deal, the 3 states consuming the most water from the Colorado River, Arizona, Nevada, and California, agreed to conserve about 13% of their total allocation. In exchange, they'll receive about $1.2 billion in federal funding. Still, it's no long-term solution.
I suspect that really the only economical way we have to resolve this problem in the long term will be to reduce our agricultural irrigation by about 25%.
Watershed Sciences Director Jay Lund of the University of California, Davis, points out that states will ultimately have to adapt to drier conditions and hotter temperatures. And he adds that preserving the region's water supply will likely involve more cuts.
None of us want to see a day where we don't have water. And so we need to be smart. We need to plan and work together to reduce our consumption and manage with the reality that we have.
Haj-Khalil suggests working on projects aimed at recycling more wastewater, capturing stormwater, and cleaning up contaminated groundwater.
The next 2 to 3 years are expected to be crucial for those working on solutions for the chronic water supply shortages here, something that will only be possible if everyone comes together. Andrew?
Caitlin, thank you. You know, some Americans might look at this and think, oh, it's just a problem for the West. Why should all Americans be concerned about this water shortage?
Well, an end to water out west would also mean an end to farming. And these states in question produce a majority of the fruit, vegetables, and even nuts that the entire country depends on. So as they continue to talk about water conservation, they're going to have to look at agriculture. Watering these crops uses about 80% of the water that they're allotted. And as they have to take a look and make more cuts, it will likely affect what we see on our shelves.
Yeah, so this plan is considered more of a short-term fix. Why is that? And what about, possible long-term issues needing to be addressed?
Right. So this deal is basically the federal government offering to pay states to use less water. And that's not something that is sustainable long term. It would cost about $1 billion. So these states need to start thinking of ways to stop using the Colorado River as their main water source. They can't expect it to replenish because these dry conditions are expected to be here to stay. So that's going to mean building more infrastructure, coming up with creative solutions to find another way to get water or just use less.
Yeah, last question. So what are Western states doing to conserve water?
Well, they're definitely used to a greater level of water conservation than many other states in the United States already. Nevada is the state that is doing the most, even before the federal government stepped in to say you need to make some dramatic changes. They already have been offering financial incentives to residents to get rid of grass. They have water police who actually go around and make sure that people are following water schedules and guidelines and patrol for leaks. And they also do extensive water recycling. They're actually already working on a wastewater recycling project with California, and we expect other states to really follow their lead.
All right, good ideas. We're hoping they work. Caitlin, thank you so much for joining us today. Really appreciate it. And in other news, residents in Northern Virginia were startled yesterday afternoon by a flurry of F-16s. The fighter jets were scrambling to deal with a perceived threat to our nation's capital. John Jessup has more on that story from our CBN News Bureau in Washington. John?
Thanks, Andrew. A sonic boom thundered over the nation's capital as fighter jets sped to intercept a small plane that flew into restricted airspace. The Capitol and the White House were on high alert as two D.C. National Guard jets went supersonic to catch the aircraft. The military pilots report the Cessna pilot was unconscious and slumped over. A few minutes later, the plane crashed near George Washington National Forest. 4 people were on board, including family members of the man who owns the aviation company. They were returning to their home in Long Island. The plane reached Long Island, but instead of landing, turned and headed for D.C. The FAA and the NTSB are investigating the cause of the crash. Well, a close encounter in the Taiwan Strait between a U.S. Navy destroyer and a Chinese warship. It's only the latest in a series of aggressively risky and concerning moves by China's military. CBN's Dale Hurd has the story.
New video today shows just how close a Chinese warship came to a U.S. Navy destroyer in the Taiwan Strait Saturday, some 150 yards, nearly causing a collision. Just last week, a Chinese fighter jet flew within 400 feet of an American spy plane over the South China Sea, causing the U.S. plane to bounce wildly in the fighter jet's wake. U.S. officials called the maneuver unnecessarily aggressive and part of a pattern by China. Retired Rear Admiral Mark Montgomery told CBN's Faith Nation China's actions are ramping up tensions.
This is the second very, very close intercept in the last 6 months of one of these types of aircraft. So really unprofessional actions by the Chinese. China fashions itself a great power and then operates petulantly like this. It really creates a crisis.
The risky engagements come as the relationship between the two countries has begun to fray, with disagreements over everything from trade to Taiwan to Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin in Singapore warned the Chinese government to rein in its conduct and offered them a choice.
To be clear, we do not seek conflict or confrontation, but we will not flinch in the face of bullying or coercion.
China's defense minister told the U.S. to, quote, mind your own business, and called the American and Canadian military presence in the Taiwan Strait a provocation. The chairman of the House Intelligence Committee says the U.S. must stand strong against an increasingly aggressive China.
This is unacceptable. And what we're seeing is an unbelievable aggression by China. If you look at the balloon that flew over the United States, the Chinese police stations, the aggressiveness against our both planes and ships and international water.
The White House is looking for a diplomatic fix to the worsening relations, sending a senior State Department official on a rare visit to Beijing.
Biden administration officials should stop chasing after their Chinese communist counterparts like love-struck teenagers. It's embarrassing and it's pathetic. In fact, it projects weakness to China.
National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan says the Biden administration will responsibly manage its relationship with China, and at some point, Joe Biden will meet again with China's President Xi. Dale Hurd, CBN News.
Thank you, Dale. Turning from China to Seoul, South Korea, where a message of peace took place as evangelist Franklin Graham preached the gospel to 70,000 people. The Saturday event honoring the 50th anniversary of his father, Billy Graham's historic crusade in the city. More than 3 million people attended the 5-day 1973 crusade, including more than 1 million at the final service. The ministry reports some 72,000 made decisions to follow Christ. Around 5,700 churches took part in this weekend's celebration of that service. True to his father's ministry, Franklin Graham preached a gospel message, and more than 6,400 people, Andrew, committed their lives to Christ.
And John, you know, Franklin's been busy. He was in our studio just a few weeks ago, and now this wonderful event commemorating 5 decades, the anniversary 50 years ago, and that family, obviously an amazing, amazing spiritual legacy. Continue, I ask you to pray for Franklin Graham and his wonderful ministry.